I was originally asked to talk to you guys about my story, talk about the keys to success. But with all the things that are happening in our world recently, it seemed a bit hollow to give that speech. I've given that speech a number of times, but the fact is, my true story has rarely been told. Tonight, I want to talk to you guys a little bit more about my life, but I want to talk about it from a little different perspective. I may say some things that startle you, but please don't lose the point of my message. As a Christian, I strive to show the love of Christ in all of my interactions. And in that spirit, I want to get real with you guys and start a very tough and oftentimes uncomfortable conversation around race. You see, I was born in this very small town in the early 70s, and my town had a very clear dividing line. It was called FM 1942. It was the street that divided the two parts of our little city. And on one side was Crosby. It was the place where most of the white people lived. On the other side was Barrett Station, a place where my ancestors settled after they'd been emancipated. My father grew up in Barrett, as did his father and his father's father. I graduated from an integrated high school, but my father, as did those before him, attended segregated schools in Barrett Station. My parents were working class, relatively low earning people, but they understood the importance of education. Both of them got their college degrees while I was in grade school, so my siblings and I got to witness them make education a priority while working full-time jobs and raising a family. I remember the first time I was confronted with racism was in elementary school. I was talking to friends in class and the name Ronald Reagan came up for who knows what reason. And as often is the case with children in politics, we all began to spout things we'd heard adults in our community say about it. Being the only black child in the classroom, I emphatically said, Reagan doesn't care about black people. And the group went quiet. Then I heard, he's the best president we've ever had, followed by a slight pause, and then the word that I still vividly recall in my head to this day. Yeah, it was the N-word. I turned to look in the direction where the words originated to see my friend, and we'll call him Johnny. He had this look as if to say, I said it, and what you gonna do about it? I froze. I hadn't expected that. I certainly hadn't expected that from a person I considered to be a friend. The fact that it was said over something so trite and said in such a cavalier manner shocked me too much to really respond. That was the first time I recall having a confrontation with racism. That day, my skewed, naive second grade brain learned, whether really true or not, no matter the relationship, white people will see me as inferior. However, also in that second grade mind, somehow if I could show them that I was different than what they perceived me to be, I could redefine blackness in their minds and win them over. So I set out to show the world that I was undeniably better than what they perceived a black child could be. I focused on being the very best I could be in every endeavor. I entered speaking competitions, I was an actor, I played football, I did pole vault, I was a jazz drummer, but my favorite was debate. I took particular pride in matching wits with the white kids from the private schools because they represented all that I despised, the things that they were given that I never had, their privilege, their resources, their opportunities, their birthright. I loved the look on my opponents' faces when I began to pontificate on the subject of a particular debate. They didn't expect this black kid to understand the topic so well and be articulate enough to deliver precise arguments and counter arguments. My goal was to be so intelligent and accomplished that I could not be ignored or denied. In that way, no one could ever call me or treat me like the N-word ever again. Fast forward to the early 90s, I graduated from high school. I was a highly accomplished student. I graduated sixth in my class. I was the reigning state debate champion in the state of Texas 4A. I'd been voted governor of Texas Boys State and represented the state of Texas in Boys Nation. I received a full academic scholarship to the University of Texas. I was clean cut. I was intelligent. I was goal oriented. I was articulate. I was what I considered to be the definition of the all-American man. My freshman year in college, I received a call from a friend telling me that one of our former classmates' brother had been shot and killed on campus at our old high school. I was devastated for my classmate and our community. Quickly made plans to get back home to attend the funeral. And on the day of the funeral, I decided to drive around the neighborhood just to see how things may have changed since I'd been gone. Things looked pretty much the same. Lots of broken down homes, but still a feeling of warmth that typified Barrett Station. I drove through our park and down the street where my family used to live. And as I made a final turn heading toward my grandmother's home, I saw flashing lights of a police car behind me. I pulled over. Officers approached my car. "Where are you coming from and where are you heading?" is what they bluntly said. Somewhat perturbed, I responded that I was driving around my neighborhood, stressing my neighborhood, and going to my grandmother's home in front of us at this point. The officers commanded me to get out of the car, and I asked why. They said I was driving through an area known for drug trafficking. Confused and being unaware of my rights, I got out of the car and was told to put my hands on the hood of the car. They frisked me. They told me to stand in front of the car while they looked inside. And as was the case in that elementary school classroom, I was completely shocked. Is this not America, where I have a right to be able to drive where I please without being harassed by police? And just like that, they turned, they went back to the car, and they drove away. The lesson for my college brain, again, whether right or wrong, was despite whatever success I thought I earned, success does not earn respect in the eyes of many who are not like me. What they see when I'm in my hoodie and ball cap is just another black man. And there's little respect afforded just another black man. It shook me. I spent all this time trying to prove my worth only to find out that it didn't matter. I was still just an N-word to those officers, in those officers' eyes. So why do these stories matter? This is not for you to feel sorry for me. I don't need or expect your pity. It's not to show you how special I am, because these experiences are not unique to me. Most Black Americans have similar experiences, and many of them have experienced much worse than I. So again, why do these stories matter? I share these stories to let you know why Black Americans are frustrated and disappointed, angry and tired. When you add the myriad individual encounters like mine to the very public ones, Black Americans are left feeling hopeless, like change is really never going to come. If you've wondered, why are people enraged to the point of protesting and rioting? If you've wondered, what does this really accomplish? Then consider this. It was September 11th, 2001. I remember hearing about the first report of a plane striking a building in New York City. I was in my office at Valley Ranch, which was the Cowboys practice facility. I turned on my TV in my office and I watched along with every American in horror. I remember feeling unsure, uneasy, and a bit confused. As news began to uncover the full plot, there was this common feeling across America that someone had to pay. I still remember George Bush with his megaphone in hand at the sight of the demolished towers, saying to the rescue workers, "The people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon." And then came the chants, "USA, USA, USA." The country was targeted and lives were taken. The vast majority of Americans, myself included, wanted revenge. Nothing that would be done at this point would resurrect the towers or restore the lives that had been lost, but it would make sure a message was sent. So October 7th, airstrikes begin in Afghanistan. October 19th, special forces parachute into Kandahar. Richard Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said the intent was to send a message to the adversaries that we're going to do whatever it takes. Again, it was not about reversing history. The country's actions were retaliatory and punitive. We wanted them to feel what we felt. So you ask, why are folks protesting and rioting? What does it really accomplish? This is what happens when a group of people feels like they've been systematically targeted and killed, just as I and most of your parents felt after 9/11. Those protesting feel like their voices have gone unheard. They can't get the lost Black lives back, but they need to make the perpetrators feel their pain. Now, let's be clear, I am not endorsing violence or looting. I personally believe that violence begets violence. So strategically, I don't think it advances its cause. Interestingly, over the last few days, we've seen violence, both from looters and police, decline. while we've also seen the number of peaceful protesters steadily climb. But my hope is that you can now understand why so many were willing to resort to extreme measures. We watched video of Ahmaud Arbery, an avid runner, out for his daily run, being targeted, chased, and ultimately killed because he didn't look like he belonged in that neighborhood. We watched video of Amy Cooper in Central Park call the police on Christian Cooper, an avid bird watcher and a Harvard graduate who also happens to be a Black man, and report that an African-American man was threatening her life when in fact he only asked her to obey the rules of the park by leashing her dog. And most recently, we watched George Floyd ruthlessly suffocated by Officer Derek Chauvin while 3 other officers looked on and did nothing to stop it. These examples were caught on film for the world to see. What about all the times when there was no video and Black people were unjustly arrested, charged, and or killed? Certainly these 3 times when it was recorded weren't the only times injustices have occurred. What about Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin, Tatiana Jefferson, Breonna Taylor, Botham Jean? The list goes on and on and on. Black people are being targeted and many times killed. Our citizens are now responding in ways that they've seen governments of the world respond time and again. They are saying that there must be consequences for egregious behavior. When there is none, it's likely to repeat itself. This country has a responsibility to listen, understand, and respond to the legitimate complaints of its citizens. And my prayer is that it does so before the society devolves any further. So if you can understand and you can empathize, you may be asking, how can I make a difference? I'm just one person. This isn't my experience. I don't know what to say or do. I don't want to offend anybody. Well, here are a few things I will give you as things that may help you if you want to be a part of the solution. Number 1, understand systemic racism. Institutional or systemic racism is defined as a form of racism expressed in a practice of social and political institutions. It is reflected in disparities regarding wealth, income, criminal justice, employment, housing, health, healthcare, political power, and education, among other factors. Society would have us believe that racism is the only form of racism. If I don't support the KKK, or use the N-word, or purposefully exclude people because of their race, I'm not racist. Institutional or systemic racism is far more difficult to identify than these forms of individual racism. It is found in the subtle messages of our society, subsequently shape thoughts and opinions. It's what you see and hear that creates a perception of Black people that you may not even truly recognize, but comes out in moments of confrontation. It is a system that allows an unproportionate number of Black Americans to perish from COVID-19 due to the lack of quality lifetime health care. It is a system that allows an unproportionate number of Black men to be arrested and convicted by a criminal justice system that is quick to deem them criminals and often find them guilty without true due process. It is a system that disallows an unproportionate number of Black families to own homes or to find employment or climb the corporate ladder or receive equal pay for equal work. It's easy to dismiss these things as the fault of Black people living in these generational cycles of poverty and poor health and crime. But I challenge you to look deeper. Who would choose poverty and crime over prosperity and security if the latter is clearly attainable? I'm going to say that again, and I want you to think about that. Who would choose poverty and crime over prosperity and security if prosperity and security are clearly attainable? What was the origin of these problems? Why are some seemingly stuck in this vicious cycle? What has society done to contribute to this problem? If you want to help, ask the tough questions. Understand systemic racism so you have a basis for deeper conversations on race. Number 2, listen without being defensive. The natural tendency of most people when being confronted with a complaint, especially if they perceive the blame to be directed at them, is to deflect. Black lives matter. No, all lives matter. Cops are killing Black people. No, there are good cops. Racism against Blacks is a problem. Well, Black people are racist too. Seems we can never really address the primary issue because we deflect to a counter argument rather than listening. and understanding the complaint. If you want to help, listen, understand, empathize. Don't be defensive. Hear the perspective. Learn what experiences comprise that perspective. Then try to put yourself in the other person's shoes. How would you feel? How would you respond? What would you need those around you to do to help? There's no need to defend an indefensible wrong. Simply address the current concern with care. Number 3, use your voice. Black people have been talking about racism for hundreds of years in America, and it still exists. We need the voices of those who don't look like us to drive real, sustainable. Talk about it. I've had the great opportunity over the last week to speak to a number of my white coworkers on issues of race. And one of the things I told many of them is that they have the access to conversations with their family and friends and other coworkers that may be very different than if I or someone like me were in the room. These are their opportunities to speak truth. When a family member or friend says something inappropriate, say something. When they say things that lack perspective of the Black experience, speak up. Take the time to educate those in your sphere of influence on things that you've taken the time to learn from Black friends and colleagues. Your voice absolutely matters. Sustainable change can't come without it. Number 4, hold your government officials accountable. This is very simple. Vote. Call or email your local, state, and federal government officials. Ask questions. Ask for specific strategies and plans. Hold them accountable. Every party and candidate should have a publicly stated policy on solving this societal problem of racism in the same way they address the economy, healthcare, and foreign policy. Until we force our government to deal with this issue, history has shown that they will continue to turn a blind eye, and some will even create more divisiveness. It's our responsibility in a democracy to demand our government be accountable. And finally, number 5, don't miss the message because of the method. Back in 2016, Colin Kaepernick, a Black quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, wanted to do something to bring awareness to the repeated pattern of cops killing unarmed Black people in America. After talking to another player, Nate Boyer, who was white and a former Green Beret, he decided that kneeling would be better than sitting because, as Boyer put it, soldiers take a knee in front of a fallen brother's grave to show respect. So Colin took the advice, and he began kneeling during the national anthem prior to games. The result was a huge outcry about how it was disrespectful to kneel during the national anthem. Frankly, I'm not here to get into the merits of kneeling during the national anthem. I won't allow the message to be hijacked as it was back then. My goal is to ask you to simply try to hear the message without being blinded by the method. Similar to the protests and even riots, our society must consider the message even when we don't approve of the method. What is the aggrieved party trying to say? What are we missing that needs to be addressed? Racism is a problem that affects us all. Black people are fed up with racism. And honestly, the more conversations I've had, I'm learning that white people are too. If we aren't willing to look past the methods long enough to understand the message, we won't solve this problem that we're all tired of discussing. So that's my story. In many ways, I'm still the same young person who attacks every endeavor in hopes of winning. I still sometimes put pressure on myself to prove my worth. I still sometimes feel the pressure of having to represent for other Black men in hopes that my performance changes the narrative. However, I've learned that my purpose is bigger than impressing those that don't look like me. Just maybe God guided me through this path precisely for this moment. My gifts and experiences combine to give me a voice that can speak for those who don't have a voice. My path has allowed me to gain access and rapport with decision makers and colleagues who largely have had a very different life experience than the Black community. It's my job to now use that influence to help advance the level of understanding. Guys, we can be better. We gotta be better. I'm not asking you to apologize for slavery. None of you were around at that time. I'm not asking you to apologize for the family you were born into. That was completely beyond your control. I'm asking you to understand that the ramifications of oppression still persist today for Black people. I'm asking you to realize that our opportunities may be vastly different because of the family you were born into and that I was born into. Acknowledge there's a difference and offer support to those who weren't born with those same advantages. You guys have an opportunity to solve a problem that Americans for 400 years in this country haven't solved. What will be your legacy? I appreciate your time. I appreciate your attention. And thanks for inviting me to speak.